When it comes to innovation and shaping the future, you don't need all the answers, but you do need space to think differently. We're launching a special 6-part B.R.A.V.E Human Leadership series in collaboration with our strategic partner, the Human Leadership Institute. In this series, we explore what it really takes to lead through change, a challenge more and more leaders are facing every day. At TomorrowZone, we help leaders shaping the future of business and technology to pause, reframe, and reimagine how they move forward so that they can lead with clarity, empathy, and purpose. Are you ready to think differently? Start your breakthrough at tomorrowzone.io. And now, on to the show. Welcome to the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast, where we explore the future of leadership, innovation, and transformation. I'm your host, Deb Reuben, and in this special 6-episode series, we're diving into what it really takes to lead in a rapidly changing world. We're not just talking about the leadership buzzwords, but we're talking about B.R.A.V.E human leadership. This is a research-backed framework built on belonging, resilience, authenticity, vulnerability, and empathy. These are human-centered leadership skills that are driving real impact, fostering innovation, and creating cultures where people and businesses can truly thrive. So joining me once again is Jen Croneberger, founder and chief inspiration officer at the Human Leadership Institute and a leading expert in relational leadership. We're going to explore the science, strategies, and stories behind B.R.A.V.E leadership and why it's more essential now than ever. Today, we're diving into the B in B.R.A.V.E, which is all about belonging. So, Jen, welcome again to the show. Let's dive in.
Awesome. Thanks for having me again, Deb.
Tell me about belonging. Why is belonging so foundational for strong leadership?
You know, it's interesting and not by accident why this is the first word. I think this is one of those things that if you get this right, a lot of the other pieces will fall into place. And interestingly enough, when we do this work, usually we're running a workshop or whatever we're doing, this one usually takes the most time. And there's a reason for that. I think a lot of that is setting the tone. It's, setting the stage of what true belonging is and what it's not. So, I think if we recognize this, people don't give their best selves to environments where they don't feel safe, valued, or included, period. I think that's the cornerstone, right?
Yeah.
And again, going back to what we talked about in the last episode, leadership is not just about strategy and execution. It's about actually creating these spaces where people can show up as their full selves and be able to contribute meaningfully. It's a waste of everyone's time if people don't feel like they're able to contribute, if leaders aren't getting the contributions that they want, right? It's this whole, stalemate basically is what happens, right? Mm-hmm. And what the research has shown us is that when people actually feel like they truly belong, they experience lower stress, higher trust, and deeper commitment to their work. They're also more engaged, more creative, and more resilient. And, think about you're as an employee at a company, who doesn't want to feel that? It's almost like, oh, this is just, this is all about feelings. And no, this is about actually, how do you want to show up as a human being in your everyday? You spend more time at work than anywhere else. And so what are we expecting from our people? But what should our people expect from us is the question. And so, a leader's ability to foster belonging directly impacts the bottom line. It impacts performance by the team. It impacts innovation. And it impacts retention. I've certainly seen people leave a company. People don't leave a company because of the company. They leave a company because of a toxic leader or culture.
Absolutely.
That's built by that leader, right? and that's why. I mean, if you ask, a high percentage, it's ridiculous. How many people say, it has nothing to do with that. It's the leadership. So again, leadership isn't about managing tasks, right? We always say we lead people and manage things. You don't manage people. You can't manage people. That doesn't work. But, it's about nurturing the human potential. And that's always going to start with creating cultures of belonging. I think that's critical.
When it's missing, I definitely see the impacts of that.
Yeah.
A lot of the work that we're doing is around digital transformation. And I think that's a misnomer because it's never only about the digital. It's about a business transformation, which involves the digital and mostly the humans.
Yeah, that's right.
But I've done numerous project retrospectives, which is where you get people together and you create that safe space that you're talking about, where people can actually share without blame, what worked well and what could have been better. And more often than not, what I find is that there's been a breakdown in this very thing where the team was not feeling safe enough to bring up bad news, to bring up critical issues, to express their curiosity about something. Maybe they don't understand something, but they didn't feel safe to actually ask a question or get clarification. And it's those little things, one after another, that pile up to create, an enormous mess and often lead teams to failure when they actually had everything in them that they needed to succeed. But they just didn't have someone to pull those ingredients together in the right way to help them perform. So I think that this is really, really important. It's not a touchy-feely thing at all because, if you're failing technology projects to the tune of 7 figures, this is a people problem. This is not a technology problem.
That's right. That's right.
Every time.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. What does belonging really look like in a workplace? When this is working well, what does good look like?
I think for a long time, people were getting this confused a little bit. People were looking at belonging as, checking boxes and metrics of, who's at the table and who's not. But it's not really about that. It's really about feeling valued, feeling included, not if you are included. It's, do I feel included? They're 2 totally different things. My name could be on a list saying, come on in the door. But if I don't feel included in that process, then that's not going to work. I don't feel then at that point that I am safe, like you were talking about, to contribute without fear, right? Fear of retaliation, fear of setback, fear of ridicule, any of it.
Or just fear of losing face, or fear of not being seen as the knowledgeable one in the group.
Exactly. And I think we were born believing that we have to know all the answers, right? It's like if you're sitting in a classroom and you don't raise your hand, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And the tricky part is, like, to survive in a world of uncertainty and rapid change and technological process. It's not about knowing all the answers. It's about questioning the answers that you think you know.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Curiosity is so key.
Yeah. And we're missing that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. So what does belonging look like? Well, here's what we've seen. We see that belonging looks like people speaking up in meetings without hesitation, right? They're able to say, hey, I have a different thought about that. Leaders actively listening to those thoughts, right? Valuing diverse perspectives, saying, hey, we need all kinds of, this is the curiosity piece. We need all kinds of information so that we can make our best move forward. And that's not just from one brain. That has to come from a diverse group of people coming from different life experiences. Belonging looks like employees feeling comfortable sharing challenges, asking for support, right? It looks like recognition that goes beyond performance and acknowledges people's humanity. That's belonging. Belonging is a culture where people don't just fit in, right? Because really fitting in is kind of the opposite of belonging.
Say more about that. That's a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we think about when we were younger, we just want to fit in. And I'll tell you my quick story on that. When I was let's see, I was in 8th grade. I was 13. I was the tallest girl in my class.
Lucky. I was the shortest.
I hated See, it's not funny. And I hated it. Hated it. I didn't want to stand out. Right. I was a good student. I was a good athlete. I was all the things. And I was more of an introvert, I think, when I was younger. And I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want all that. I just wanted to go do my thing and have fun. And I remember it was the 8th grade yearbook, and they were doing, remember those superlatives, like most likely to do this and best this,
yeah,
right? Yeah, goofy. Well, I was chosen in 8th grade as most athletic for the girls. And the boy who happened to be chosen most athletic boy, good old Josh Lipton, he's still a friend of mine, so it's okay. He was the shortest kid in the whole school.
Yay, Josh.
Yeah, right. Go, Josh. So they put us together in these pictures, right? And they're going along the line and they're taking these pictures and everyone's watching. And they decided it would be a great idea to put Josh on a chair. Right. So I don't know who was more mortified, me or him, to be honest, because, here's poor Josh on a chair and he's only slightly taller than me and I'm leaning, right? So point is, I wanted to fit in, meaning my lean was changing my stature to fit into the crowd. So fitting in, I have to actually adapt myself to actually fit someone else, to fit the group, where belonging is when that group just fits me. Two totally different things, right? I'm not changing who I am when I belong. And so, that stuck with me, obviously, most of my life, where I really understood what that felt like. Feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling appreciated for who I am, not who I was trying to be. Belonging isn't just about those big moments where we're like, oh, that's belonging, right? It's about the small, consistent actions that say, you matter here. And that's what I think, if we can make those moments, make more of those moments, I think you start to see belonging as this team dynamic that is a non-negotiable.
I love what you said there, because it sounds like this is something that can only really happen with intention. You said we need to make those moments. And so to that, and I'm just curious, you talk about psychological safety, and maybe that's not a phrase that most people would use, or a term that most people would use, psychological safety. Like, what is that?
Right.
First of all, like, what is that? But how can leaders create that safety and trust? And also, can you share an example of what that looks like when it's not working, and what does good look like?
So I see psychological safety as something that's built through consistent behaviors, not grand gestures. Now, notice the word I use there, consistent, right? Think about leaders, maybe in your past, that weren't consistent. How hard was that to build trust, right? You never knew who was going to show up in the room that day. We all know people like that, right?
Well, yeah, those are the leaders where you're walking on eggshells every
Correct.
day. Yep.
There's no trust built there. So consistency is really a key component of this. It's being that authentic same person that you are day in and day out, so that people learn to trust that, right? I know who's showing up. Hey, you might not be happy today, or you might be really upset about something that happened, or you might be ecstatic, whatever it is, but we're riding the train, not the roller coaster, right? And that's key, is that there's a consistent feeling that is there, and you can create those things. So I think one of the first things that we see is leading with vulnerability, meaning I'm going to share my own mistakes. I'm going to tell you about a time that I messed it up. I'm going to ask for feedback on something that I did. I'm going to admit when I don't have all the answers. Hear that clearly, right? Do we need to say it louder for the people in the back? Admit when you don't have all the answers. It's okay. It sets the tone for authenticity. And it also, creates that curiosity piece that we need so much.
Yeah. That's one of the things we talk about a lot.
All the time.
At
right?
TomorrowZone. I mean, I often refer back to I had an experience in my first IT job, and one of the guys I work with, his 4-year-old son was always doing goofy stuff, and he'd always come in and tell stories. And one day he's like, "Yeah, now he's saying he's always using this on me, Dad. I can't know that." And
I love that.
I've held on to that as, at first I thought, oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But
it's so true.
It's such a life lesson from a 4-year-old that I've carried to this day, because there are so many times where we can't know all the things.
No.
And if we can get into this place of psychological safety and trust, actually we can start to discover the things that we need to.
That's right.
Together.
That's amazing. I love that. I'm gonna steal that. I can't know that.
I can't know that.
Just can't. Yeah. And there's something to be said about that, though. I think, recognizing those, they're not shortcomings, right? We used to see that as, oh, there's a lack of knowledge, so I must be bad. That's not it. That's not it at all.
That's such a huge lie, though, that holds people back.
Exactly.
Thinking that they have to know everything and that they have to know it now.
And if they don't, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah. I mean, when we're working in complex projects, there are things you can't humanly know until you get to certain parts of the project.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because learning and knowing them are dependent on other things happening along the way. But people beat themselves up. They beat each other up for not knowing things that they can't possibly know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think part of that too is the ability to listen, I think goes along with this in an interesting way. I've seen this be a big piece of building belonging, is listening to understand, not just to respond. Creating spaces where people feel heard. Whether you're feeling like you need to know something and you don't know it, and you're feeling this kind of, negative about yourself, catching that as a leader, recognizing when that's happening on your team, right? And because you're listening, because you're paying attention, you're creating those spaces. I think by truly engaging with other people's experiences, that gives us such an edge. But it also, I think, encourages experimentation, helps us to embrace failure, because, not knowing isn't a failure, but something may happen that's a failure. And we need to be okay with that. We need to make it safe for our people to take risks without fear of blame, and that whole, going back to that consistency piece, being predictable and reliable is everything. Consistency builds trust always. If leaders say, and I'm sure we all know people like this, and we've seen it, where leaders say one thing and do another, then trust erodes very quickly. And it's a lot harder to build it back up the second time.
Yeah.
And this one, I think, is key with belonging. And I love this so much. It's something that I've really implemented. Checking in, not just checking on. Kind of what we talked about.
What's the difference there?
Ask people how they're really doing, not just about the work. So it's a simple shift that fosters that human connection. I'm going to check in. How are you doing? So you notice, and you've worked with us long enough now, that we do a check-in at the beginning of every single thing that we do. How are you doing? We either ask, what's one word that kind of brings you into the space? What, how are you feeling right now? Give us a word. Or on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you showing up? Whatever it is, it's an ability to stop, to actually check in themselves, but to also share that with a group experience, is now saying, I am accountable to this team by being aware of where I am right now. And it shows leaders how to actually do that effectively, to say, let's show up for each other today, right? Let's just be here in this moment together. So we try to model that behavior so that you see how easy this is to do. But it's about checking in, not just checking on. I'm not checking on your work. I'm not checking on the numbers. I'm checking in.
That gets back to one of the things we talked about in our first episode, and the power of connection.
Yes.
And I've actually had, the blessing to watch you in action And I'm seeing my team is actually affected and changing the way that they facilitate with customers because of the way that you model this. And so even in our own team meetings now, my team is facilitating these check-ins, and it changes the nature.
It does.
Of our interaction, but it's also like building, it's becoming kind of a glue. Like we're more connected than ever. And people feel like they can bring up things, like, hey, okay, I need to talk to you about something and it's uncomfortable, or maybe it's not good news, but we can have those conversations that we need to have, that if you didn't have that, it could actually get you in trouble.
Yeah.
And so it really opens the door to a more connected and collaborative team environment. But the other thing I was thinking about is, when we think about the way that our day-to-day experience of life is today in the business world, I know for myself, you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting.
Yep.
And your context switching. Topics.
Yes, which is
you're doing a massive shift in who you're working with, not just what you're talking about, or the purpose and reason, the why behind the meeting, and having these little tools to check in actually helps you to arrive and focus.
That's right.
Like, focus is like this super rare golden thing that is so tough to get, but like even having those tools that you teach to help you and your team transition into what you're focusing on, every single interaction becomes that much more successful and profitable, so that you're not just wasting your time meeting, you're actually being effective.
Yeah. And what's amazing about that, I think you just said it, what some people see as, oh, we don't have time for all that. Quite frankly, it's shrunk my timeframes a lot. It's made me a lot more effective, because I know I can get to a certain place quickly if I have these pieces in place, right? So, if I'm really sitting one-on-one with a client or with somebody who, and even my own team, same thing. We'll have days where, look, everybody's got stuff, right? So whatever is going on outside of work, we hold space for that. There are plenty of times where one of us would arrive at a team meeting just like, oof, I'm struggling today. And we just pause, everything gets pushed aside. Let's chat. Let's just sit in it. And we are so much more effective when we can actually process that stuff and not be holding on to it to try to, push our way through the day in a very ineffective manner where, things might be getting half done. And, it's slowing our cadence down so much. It's amazing what that does, really.
Yeah. I think it's a power tool, a survival skill to just even be able to navigate what we're facing for the future. Can you share a story or an example? Like what does this psychological, safe, trusting environment look like in a business environment?
So I was working with another client. This is a different client now, who was going through a lot of change, a lot of leadership change. A lot of leaders were kind of, in bigger companies, you see this kind of shift, this turnover of, a few years in the C-suite positions, and then they kind of rotate, and some move off, some come in, it's just how it goes. But they were in the middle of kind of a lot of that. And I think there was that kind of director population, that middle but senior level leader, were really feeling it. And I could see that. I could see that there was a feeling of that the trust just wasn't there. That there was this feeling of, I can't make a mistake right now because, new leadership, I don't want to look dumb. So they were really overextending themselves to try to show up as, I'm a go-to, you can trust me, you can lean on me, And I was watching what it was doing to them, and it was starting to erode them personally. So we had this session. I was already kind of, contracted with this company for a few years. We were doing some work together. So I was in it. I knew these people. I could see, what was going on. And we had this one session with the directors in the level right beneath them in this one department. It's kind of one vertical. And so we're sitting in this room, and I had them pull their chairs into a circle. And they were like, okay, what are we doing here?
This is weird.
Like, are we going to sing? Is there going to be a campfire? Right. So I was like, let's just get into a circle so we can see each other. That was number one. I wanted people to actually be able to have eyes because, they were all sitting at like tables. You couldn't see who was over there. So in the back of this huge room, we were in this big auditorium, and I had them just kind of bring your chair and let's go sit in a circle. And it was interesting because in this kind of connection circle, they kind of arrived in this circle like this, sitting back in their chairs, legs crossed, arms crossed, kind of like, what's about to happen here? I don't trust any of this. And I love that. Bring that on. I love that so much. So I'm kind of sitting there, and we start talking, and my goal here was to bring down some of that barrier, to kind of bring some of those walls down, even if it was taking brick by brick. That was okay. But we were going to start to dismantle a little bit of that. And I started to see, I would ask questions like, hey, let's talk a little bit. Let's go around and whoever wants to speak up, just talk. You don't need to, there's no order here. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and I just want you to speak to those. And the first question I asked was, what's your biggest barrier right now? What do you feel like is your biggest hurdle? What's the biggest thing that you feel like you have to get over right now? As an individual, as a team, as an organization, whatever. Courageous people would kind of step in and start to talk. And then I asked, once we got kind of through that, I started to see some of the arms drop a little bit. People were still kind of sitting back and reserved, but the arms would drop, and, a little bit of maybe some hands instead of arms. And I started to see, as I asked, let's go around and share a win. What was your latest, greatest win? Give me a win. So we go around and people are starting to talk about wins, and I said, okay, now what I want you to do is, out of both of those things that you just shared, now we're going to take the next step. And I want you to talk to someone in this circle who you feel needs to hear your voice right now, and just give them some sort of affirmation. Well, that was mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. I mean, these people who started like this, by the end of this, were all leaned in. Some were like holding hands, putting arms around each other, tears, just all the things. And it was almost like a release that they just needed. Just get it out. Just get rid of that stuff that you're feeling so scared. And we walked out of that with people laughing and smiling and arms around each other like, we got this. We got this. And thank you for saying that. And I'm so glad you said that. And it was this moment. It was 90 minutes in a circle to get to that. And they continued to do that. They continued to show up, and they said, let's have a connection circle.
Oh, wow.
Let's have a connection circle. We'll meet you in the auditorium, right?
So this wasn't just an event. This changed how they started to interact with each other.
Exactly. And what was amazing about that is I started to see, and I would hear on these roundtable calls that we would check in, and I had a couple of people say, hey, you know what? This crazy thing happened. We had this horrible event happen over the weekend, and we thought, everything was a mess. And then I realized, John over there in that department actually could help me right now. I didn't know what he did before. I didn't care, didn't know John. I was in my silo doing my thing. Now I reached out to John, problem solved in 30 minutes, which would have taken a whole week.
Wow.
It's stuff like that. That's the stuff that changes when you start to build this connection and you build belonging into the framework of the organization.
Yeah, that is really powerful. What are some of the most common barriers to belonging, and how do you address them? And I think that was a really powerful story, but are there other things that leaders can do to address this?
I think that there are some companies that I've seen and been a part of where there was just a natural, and sometimes this is from the top, who knows how this kind of comes to be, but a natural exclusionary culture. It's like cliquey, you know what I mean? It's like there's these little pockets of people who, if you belong there, you're cool, or, you know how it goes, right? It's like in high school. But when employees feel like outsiders due to some of these like unspoken norms or groups or cliques or whatever, that's a big barrier for belonging, or when leaders only go to certain people, right? When they say, hey, I need help with the big game, or I need help to reel in the big client. You're my guy. I'm going to go to you. Well, what happens to everyone else? They might feel left out or, not considered that maybe they have something to add. And I think leaders have to be intentional about creating inclusive opportunities for connection and for output.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point there. I've actually experienced this at an industry level, and a lot of the things I've done in the equipment finance space, I've facilitated a lot of different innovation talks and panels and events and roundtables. And one of the things I've noticed is that you've kind of got your go-to people, and that becomes a comfort zone, and it becomes a habit. And so one of the things that I've done over the years is who are the new voices that we need to hear from? And, like over the past 6 years, I led a innovation council. Oh yes. You know what? I have that sticky too. Where is it?
My sticky on my computer. Who are we forgetting to include?
Yes.
That's how you combat belonging.
Yep. I've got one like that as well. Who else needs to be in this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here it is. It's purple in my world. Who else needs to be involved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Critical.
But who else could we involve in this? And, by intentionally thinking that way over the course of 6 years, I was blessed to be able to collaborate with over 40 different senior and C-level leaders in regular trend scanning sessions. I mean, we kept that council to about 18 people at any one time, but it was really cool because I was able to, I got a lot out of it because I got to hear so many diverse perspectives from different lenses across the industry, and even people that were new to the industry, which I always love that fresh brain perspective on things. But, it came from intentionally thinking like, well, who else? Like who don't I know yet? Who could bring a different perspective, And so I think that you bring up a good point, because we can get stuck in that rut of this is the person I always go to.
That's right.
I know that, and good on them. They can do it. They're reliable, but
there are others
who else could step into that role.
That's right. Because what happens? That person's sick that day, and you have no go-to. Like that's
right. Yeah.
I think too, a piece that goes along with that quickly that is important is lack of recognition. I think yes, pulling those people in, but also recognizing like when people feel unseen or unappreciated, that diminishes belonging quickly. I think a culture of frequent, meaningful recognition can transform engagement. Meaningful, not like, oh, you have the best hair award, or, like it's got to be meaningful. Like but being able to publicly recognize someone, even in an email to the team, hey, just a shout out, want to give a shout out. What a job well done. Thank you for stepping in and doing this. Whatever it is, it takes a second to do, but it's a lifetime. That's the key there.
And those little moments are so valuable, and it's so easy to just keep moving forward on your task list, putting out the fires of the day rather than stopping and celebrating those little wins and recognizing them. I know that's something that I'm still working on, because we're constantly like, what's next? What's next? What's next? I'm wired to constantly ask, what's next? TomorrowZone.
Right.
But one of the things I've found even with my clients is like if we're in a stand-up meeting cadence or something, and I'll hear something and I'm like, wait, I want to just stop everyone and recognize what this person did.
I love that.
Because you're looking at it as like a line item on a status report, but I want you to understand how big this is and how impactful it is and how vital it is for what you're trying to achieve, And so sometimes you have to actually stop and intentionally call those things out because, in the flurry of activities of the day, those are things that are easy to miss. And that person who put heart and soul into doing what they did, when it's not recognized, you actually have a flight risk.
Correct.
I've been that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you just said a word that I think is, again, important to repeat: intentionality. Belonging is built through intentionality. It's the valuing people, that the seeing them and including them. We talk about including every person at the table, but it's showing them that they don't only have a seat, but they have a voice, and they're not afraid to use that voice in the middle of an important conversation.
Yeah.
It's real belonging.
Yeah. So how do you measure whether a team has achieved this feeling that they belong?
I think that you can do this both qualitatively and quantitatively. I think you can do, a lot of people use surveys and feedback that way, asking asking questions like, do you feel valued for your contributions? Do you feel safe to speak your mind without fear of negative consequences? Do you feel like you're a part of a supportive team? Asking those kinds of questions, getting real feedback. I think another place to look is turnover and engagement data. Mm-hmm. High turnover or disengagement often signals a lack of belonging. That's clear, right? Give people a reason to stay. If they feel like they're part of a team, it's a lot harder to leave the team, right? And, I think there are a lot of people, and I've even talked to people like this. I hate this, that, or everything else, but I love the people I work with. And so that keeps me there.
Yep.
Okay, great.
I hear that a lot. Yeah.
Right? And that's key, right? Also, I think another one is observing team behavior. So we used to do this thing when I used to coach back in the day in sports, and it was catch them doing good. So not always yelling at someone like to fix something or, hey, you're not doing that right. It's, hey, really well done on that. Good job. I just saw how you did that. That was perfect. So, whatever it is, it's observing that team behavior. Are people collaborating openly? Are you seeing it? Call it out. Are voices equitably heard in meetings? Do you see that happen? Wait, you know what? I want to go back to what Deb said. Right? If I'm seeing Deb being talked over, I'm going to pause. Hey, let's stop for a second. I'd like to go back to what Deb was saying. I think she had something really important. It's times like that. Watch, listen, pay attention. You're going to learn a lot about your people, but you have to observe. You have to be in it to be able to watch what happens. And then the last one I would say probably is having one-on-one conversations with people. Sometimes the most powerful insights come from asking, how can we make this place where, a place that you truly feel like you're valued and that you belong? How do we do that? And letting them answer that. That's a big question. And it also is extremely eye-opening at what they say.
Yeah, that's just so good. Well, we could go on forever.
Just real quick, just remember this. If it's not being measured, it's not being prioritized.
Ooh.
I will say that.
Okay.
I think that's important.
Well, actually, yeah. Okay. So I was going to get ready to close this, but I want to go back to what you just said. So how would you measure this?
So, again, I think it's doing all of those things, but paying attention to them together. So looking at that data, looking at the surveys and the feedback that you get, asking the question, watching the behavior of the team, having one-on-one conversations, all of those things, I think tells the complete story. And I think that's how, if you're measuring from that and you're saying, okay, I'm getting this data here and this here, and now I'm putting this together to tell the story of belonging here at this organization, that's being prioritized then, right? Because now I'm measuring it. Now I'm looking at, here's a survey, here's this, here's that. And you're putting these pieces together. I don't think it's one thing. I think you really have to do this in a way of, what story are you telling,
Well, and also I think, in the same way that you have a discipline and a habit of continually looking at your financial results and the KPIs of, the vital signs of your business, what are the vital signs of your team's health that you should be looking at regularly? So you kind of got my brain on fire, because I was like, oh my gosh, this would be a really amazing dashboard to keep track of, regularly, just even to assess your own leadership, but also the health of your team.
And we have a couple pieces in the works on that too. So,
oh, cool. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, we're working on it.
We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. Well, let's close out this episode. So, for leaders who might be looking to build belonging in their team, what's one step that they could take today?
I would say the easiest and the quickest step to take is that intentional appreciation that we were talking about. Going beyond the generic praise, like, hey, good job. It's really taking a moment to specifically tell someone how they add value, how their presence maybe makes a difference on the team, or maybe call out how they inspire others, how you see that happen. Recognition, I think, is one of the pieces that's so quick to fuel belonging, because again, it goes back to that reinforcing you matter here, right? And so appreciate someone. Be intentional about it though. Call out a specific thing, not just like, hey, I appreciate you. I mean, that feels good. That's fine. And they're like, oh, that's nice. Thanks. But if you're calling out a specific thing and being really intentional on how they're adding value, how their presence makes a difference, how they inspire others, use those as guidelines. That absolutely, it's like putting jet fuel on the fire. And I think that explodes belonging in a way that you can't do otherwise.
Love it. So awesome. Jen, thank you again for sharing your insights on brave human leadership.
It's great to be here with you, Deb. Thanks.
So if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, share it with a colleague. Until next time, stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.